This Jesus is moved. He's easily moved. He is not hard-hearted. He is soft-hearted. He is easy to touch. He can be pricked by your condition. He is a, Hebrews, sympathetic high priest.
So what moves the heart of Christ? In this episode of Light and Truth, John Piper turns to John 5, verses 1 to 18, to show that Jesus is not distant or indifferent. He is deeply compassionate and moved by our suffering. This sermon was originally delivered at Bethlehem Baptist Church on August 23, 2009.
This is an amazing passage, these verses 1 through 18. It shows us about Jesus, things that probably we're familiar with, and yet seeing them in new ways can open our eyes afresh to Him. It deals with the fact that in this world where there is disease and calamity and death all around us, this is true in spite of the fact that Jesus has absolute power to heal. He just speaks a word and bodies obey Him. So what's the deal with all the sickness in the world if He's that strong? And so I'm praying that we'll see Him, we'll understand this healing, we'll know where it's leading, and we'll have some sense of why more people aren't healthy. Let's start with the setting, verses 1 to 5. After this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. So this is now He's going up again. Came back from there through Samaria. Now He's going back again. Now, there is in Jerusalem, by the sheep gate, a pool in Aramaic called Bethesda, which has 5 roofed colonnades. In these lay a multitude of invalids, blind, lame, paralyzed. One man was there who had been an invalid for 38 years. So 3 observations from the setting here to get us in the right place. Number 1, Jesus is in Jerusalem. He makes a point to go to this pool. He didn't have to go. He chose to go. There are people with diseases and disabilities there, and they're waiting for the waters to be troubled because evidently healings happen. It doesn't tell us why or they happen, and so people gather, and then some of them, or one of them, it seems, gets healed. Second observation. Verse 4 is missing in ESV, NIV, NASB, but there in the old authorized King James Version. So what's with the missing verse? The verse 4, which you can't see if you have a more contemporary version, is omitted intentionally, and I think rightly, because it is missing in the oldest and best Greek manuscripts. Just a little lesson in text criticism here. The New Testament was written in Greek, and there are extant in existence 5,000 plus manuscripts or fragments of manuscripts, which is an embarrassment of riches. There is no other ancient document, bar none, that has so many documents, manuscripts, not printed versions, but manuscripts that were originally copied out to compare with one another, so that in the comparing, those who are called text critics and do this for a living can amazingly work their way back through all the comparison of these texts and their oldest versions to a very reliable version that then gets translated into various languages of the world. Now, probably what happened with this verse, and I'm not going to spend a long time on it, but I thought you'd stumble if I didn't say something like, where's verse 4? I think verse 7 is crying for an explanation that verse 4 probably was provided in a margin and then worked its way into a text as people copied it. That's just a guess. Look at verse 7. The sick man answered him, Sir, I have no one to put me in the pool when the water is stirred up. And while I'm going, another steps down before me. And if that's all you knew, and it is all we know, you'd say, well, what's up? Who stirs the water? And why is there a healing? And what's going on here? And now here's verse 4. If you don't have the King James, you don't see it, except in the footnote, perhaps. It says that the invalids were, quote, waiting for the moving of the water, for an angel of the Lord went down at certain seasons into the pool and stirred up the water. Whoever stepped in first after the stirring of the water was healed of whatever disease he had. And so now verse 7 makes sense because that's there and now we understand. And that may be exactly right. It's just not in any of the early manuscripts, and it has other marks of not being in the original document that John wrote, hence the omission of it. Fortunately for us, and this is the case with virtually all omissions and differences, they don't bear on any crucial doctrine. So if you took all the uncertain omissions that are there because of the original manuscript, nothing would change as far as what we believe about Christ. So I'm not going to say any more about verse 4. You can study up on that if you want to and study our manuscript evidence. Here's the third observation. That was number 2. The first, they're in Jerusalem. He intentionally goes. Second, verse 4 is missing. Just 3 observations about the setting. The third one is this term multitude of invalids. You see that in verse 3? In these colonnades lay a multitude of invalids, blind, lame, paralyzed. That's going to become important. Because if you look at verse 13, it says, and this is going to be significant why he did this, it says, Jesus had withdrawn as there was a crowd in that place. Large number. So you've got probably, hundreds of sick people and probably a lot of caregivers. So Jesus has chosen to walk into a situation just packed, evidently, with people, which probably highlights the uniqueness that he fingers one man and only one. So hold on to that, note it. There's a multitude there, and we'll come back to see what the implications of that are. Now verses 6 through 9. And the question we raise here is, who is this Jesus? When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been there a long time, he said to him, Do you want to be healed? The sick man answered him, Sir, I have no one to put me in the pool when the water is stirred up. And while I'm going, another steps down before me. And Jesus said to him, Get up, take up your bed and walk. And at once the man was healed, and he took up his bed and walked. Now that day was the Sabbath. We've read these stories so many times, we don't have our breath taken away anymore. Believe me, he did. And so did everybody around him. First observation. I think what John is doing here in the way he tells the story is he's highlighting the unparalleled knowledge of Jesus, the amazing compassion of Jesus, and the immediate sovereign power of Jesus. I think that's what's going on. So let's take those one at a time. Verse 6. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been there a long time. He just knew that. He knows this man's situation. Without being told, he knows this man has been here a very long time. He's paralyzed. He's unable to walk. Perhaps been there hoping for a miracle for year after year. Maybe when he was a boy, his parents brought him, and now he's 38 years old, or the paralysis came later and he's older than that. But this has been a long, hard life. And there he is, and Jesus knows it. He knows this man. And I just want to linger on that for a minute, because it's when you hear the next two, this one becomes more precious. When you know Jesus, that is, when you are granted by God the spiritual eyes to see Him for who He is, and you now know Him, you know Him as friend, Savior, the supreme treasure of your life, that He knows you perfectly is unspeakably precious. I just commend you to think about this. To know someone, to have a conversation with someone who knows everything you're going to say before you say it. What would a conversation like that be like? Why am I talking? To know Christ is an unusual relationship. It's not your ordinary relationship. He knows you. He knows everything you've ever done. He knows every feeling that you have. He knows every thought that just glances through your mind that you're so glad nobody else knows went through your mind. He knows it went through your mind. And every word that comes out of your mouth, He knows it all together before it is on your lips. Linger on that and let it have an effect on your friendship. Talk to Him about that tonight. Talk to Him about that. Have a conversation about what it means that He knows you so well, so thoroughly, all your history. Number 2, compassion. This is one of those other things that, if it's true about Jesus, makes being known by Him more precious. I mean, if He were mean-spirited and hard-hearted, to be known by Him would not be good news. But if He's as compassionate as He appears to be in this text, then that's good news. Now here he chooses to go to this pool. He chooses to go here. And He didn't have to. It didn't sneak up on Him. He didn't stumble by. He chooses to go here. In fact, let your mind run back over a few weeks. I think He chooses to go to this pool the same way He chose to go to Samaria. Why Sychar? Why the well? We know why. There's a woman there. She's had 5 husbands. She's sleeping with her boyfriend. That's why He went to Samaria. It was no accident. She would be His unlikely instrument by which He would get a great revival in Sychar, and hundreds of people probably turn to Him and call Him the Savior of the world. Jesus knows what He's doing. He's after people. The Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. He's after, and then He leaves Samaria, and last week He goes to Galilee. Why? Prophet dishonoring Galilee, because there's an official there with a sick boy who will pass a test. That's why. And then He's gone. He's back to Jerusalem. What's He doing in Jerusalem? He's going to a pool and finding one man. This is the way Jesus is. Don't think Jesus is into crowds. Jesus is into individuals. Big time. Like you. And He has the capacity to do that now that He's in heaven, which is one of the reasons why He said, it's better for you if I go than if I stay, because if I don't go, then the Comforter can't come. And I'm coming in the Comforter, and now I can relate to everybody at the same time individually. That's another sermon. But it's really good. Really precious. I haven't written it yet. He asks him if he wants to be healed. Verse 6. Do you want to be healed? And the man doesn't say yes. He says, verse 7, and I think this is significant because Jesus doesn't even hesitate. He just goes ahead and does it. He says, "Sir, I have no one to put me in the pool when the water is stirred, and while I'm going, another steps down before me," and the next thing out of Jesus' mouth is, "Get up." Now, what's going on here? Why? He says, "Do you want to be healed?" The man says, "You don't seem to understand. You got to get to the water, and I can't get to the water, and I've been here a long time." And I think the reason for that answer is to set us up to say Jesus felt a lot of compassion for that. When he heard that story, which he knew already, he just felt for this guy. I counted 9 times. I just looked up this Greek word splanchnon, splanchnizomai, which means bowels and guts. And he was moved, his bowels were moved with compassion in the Old King James. I looked that up to see how often this happened. I counted 9 times in the Gospels where Jesus is moved here with compassion. Just compassion. This man gives 0 evidence of faith in Jesus, makes no profession of faith whatsoever, nor does he have any recognition of who Jesus is. He is totally disqualified for being healed as far as faith goes. One qualification: he has a massive need, and he's had it a very, very long time. That's all. So I think that's what we're supposed to feel at this point in the story, is this Jesus is moved. He's easily moved. He is not hard-hearted. He is soft-hearted. He is easy to touch. He can be pricked by your condition. He is a, Hebrews, sympathetic high priest. What's that mean? Not unacquainted with all of our tests. We usually translate it temptations. Tempted like we are. The word tempt and test are the same. So any test, any pain in your life that would threaten your faith, he's been there, he knows. And so the whole point is, he's that kind of heart. So it looks like this is a response, not a religious thing, not a faith-filled thing. There's no faith going on here. Man's not even going to have a clue who this was when they ask him, "Who did this to you?" This is just raw compassion so far. It won't stay there. Or the compassion will have a form that we're not expecting soon. He is easily moved by the misery you feel, but his therapies are not always what you want. There's a difference. When his therapy isn't what you want, cancer, loss of job, tensions at home, when his therapy isn't what you want, it's not because he's hard-hearted. It's not because he's heartless. He's compassionate, and he's merciful, and he's a sympathetic high priest. But as every doctor or nurse or parent knows, every therapy is not easy. Physical therapy after an accident, long, hard recovery, making you bend your knees in ways you don't want them to bend your knees. Let's sum that up. This is what we've seen so far in these verses 6 to 9. He has complete knowledge of us. He has heartfelt compassion for us. And now, power. Look at verses 8 and 9. Jesus said to him, "Get up, take up your bed and walk." And at once the man was healed, and he took up his bed and walked. And I think the word "at once," I think John, as he writes this, just loves to say that, because he said it before. You remember? After the official went away, your son is well. You can go now. His son's 15 miles away. And when he meets the people who say, "He's okay," he says, "What time did it happen?" Remember that last week? And they said, seventh hour, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And he said, he nailed it. That's the time he spoke the word. He just speaks, and 15 miles away, cells change in bodies. And he did here as well. At once, 38 years of paralysis are over. Not just over like, I need some therapy now to get up. I'm up. I'm up and holding my bed. And I'm on my way probably to the temple, because that's where he's going to be found in a few minutes, which is a good sign. This is power. This is immediate sovereign power. And he still has it. He still has it over everything, bar none, at every minute, everywhere on the planet and in the universe. He upholds the universe by the word of his power. He speaks, diseases obey, wind obeys.
This is Light and Truth, God-centered preaching to help you see Christ clearly and treasure Him truly. I'm your host, Dan Kruver. Thank you for listening. On our next episode, John Piper continues our 8-part series, Life Through the Word of Christ, with a message titled, Christ's Call to Holiness. I hope you'll join us. For more resources, visit desiringgod.org.